We are going to be doing a lot of these. We're going to start posting on YouTube at Nerd Community Discord. In our own Discord, we're going to post those links under the video, and then Twitter at Nerd United 1. My name is Dallin Curry. I'm a product manager here at Nerd. I'm going to be doing most of the questions here today. My co-hosts are Connor McLeod and Cameo Doran. Cameo Doran.
Like
Doran, that's what I was told. We'd love to hear from you guys, talk about what you're doing here and why we're all here to talk today. Starting with Cameo, because Connor's drinking.
All right, I'm Cameo Doran, and I'm actually between titles here at Nerd. I used to be VP of Products for the brands. We're an incubator here, and I'm now, my title is Chief Community Officer, VP of Community for Nerd United right now. So that's me.
Yeah, I'm Connor McLeod. I am SVP of Product for Prime. And a whole host of things. My unofficial title, Chief Meme Officer. Everybody's a chief of something, and I'm a chief of memes. So.
That's delightful.
And nicknames.
And I am very good at nicknames.
For yourself or for others?
Mostly for others.
Okay.
Their opinion of that might change, but
yeah, that's the best part. That they hate it.
So I mentioned it before. This is the Innovative Community Podcast. We kind of just want to get started on the topic today, which is we're going to go with Intro to Innovation. Intro to Innovation, kind of get everybody started, new viewers who are not really familiar with the topic, and advanced viewers who, are going to understand what we're talking about from the get-go, right? So we had a couple of ideas for questions to get things started, and I think our favorite one was...
Should we intro ourselves, like what we do?
Yeah, we'd love that.
Our backgrounds? I mean,
yeah.
You know who we are.
How'd you get here?
Okay, I can go.
Go.
Let's see. I have always loved learning. And while I was at college, I ended up in this group of professors who were studying innovation and entrepreneurship space. Ended up starting a startup out of that. That was hardware, which forced us to be interdisciplinary, meaning mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, computer science, business, marketing, all that stuff, and just really fell in love with the idea of interdisciplinary innovation, meaning people who have totally different backgrounds speak different languages when they talk about products and building things, and then bringing them together to try to build something. So I started this startup as a door opening startup that used Bluetooth to open doors for people when they got near it. So primarily people with cerebral palsy or other mobility disabilities. Founded that ended up getting into Y Combinator, which was a hoot. Raised a little bit of money. I ended up leaving that to do recommendations and search systems at Ancestry, which is kind of their bread and butter, which was a ton of fun. Learned a lot. Same thing. I really got to work with tons of PhDs in data science, DNA scientists, professional genealogists, the marketing team, and just really leaned into that interdisciplinary innovation part. From there, I ended up at JPMorgan Chase, kind of doing something similar, but way different data sets for their investment bank on the public side initially. So building recommendations and search and discovery tools for the salesperson, the trader, the quants across all of the desks for all of the different types of financial instruments, and had some success there and ended up scaling that to the whole firm. So, and Chase, public side, wholesale payments, there's like almost 30 businesses under the JPMorgan Chase umbrella officially. And then now I'm here. So I met some of the nerds here at Nerd and was given this vision of how can we enable the world to innovate? How can we enable any team to really drive that? And that's what I love. So here we are.
That's great. I have follow-up questions, but we'll get to them. Cameo.
Okay. I joined a startup many years ago, 2006. It was a SaaS company, and except we didn't call it that back then. Honestly, that wasn't a thing. It was just software, and it happened to be in the cloud. We also didn't call it the cloud, but it was just software on the internet. And it was a network marketing startup. There were 6 of us. And we were in the very awesome situation where we had dedicated customers and we had money coming in. Because there just weren't a lot of people building that type of software at the time. It was back office software. And so we had money, which was pretty good, but we were completely bootstrapped. And what that meant is, like, my role was QA, project management, product management, and customer support. That meant that when people would come and say, hey, this is what we need the software to do, it was super early stage software. Like, there wasn't any way for people to manage users. I had to do it all. Like, it was shocking that we had any customers at all, but there just wasn't any competitors. So they'd come to me and they'd say, hey, I need this XYZ functionality. And I'd sit down with the engineers. Everything would always take way too long. Customers would be mad. And then inevitably when we would say, okay, here's the thing you've been waiting for, they'd be like, that's not what I wanted. You and I sat here and talked about this. You totally screwed it up, And it was so frustrating to realize, especially if you're bootstrapping and your choices mean whether or not you're going to lose that next customer, or we did a lot of custom development for our customers for extra revenue, like a lot of early stage companies do. And the margin for error on picking the wrong thing to build or building the thing that they are sure that they want wrong, it just was super obvious to me. So I worked there for 5 years and then sold my share and got out and went to work for a custom software company here in Utah that at the time was the biggest software consulting company, I think, in Utah. And initially worked for Western Governors. We were in the process of completely replatforming them, completely redoing their customer experience. And I was put over that entire project, which was, a multi-million-dollar project, and really had some aspirational goals. Western Governors is a fantastic university because they are quite innovative of how they look at education. But you still got to nail that user experience. And so did that. I worked at that company for almost 11 years, and it gave me an opportunity to, well, for one thing, if you're a passionate Agilist, consulting and any custom development or any higher development is anti-Agile out of the gate. And one of the things that I realized pretty early on, as I was predominantly the one who would write the proposals, was that there was no way we could deliver on the commitments that we were committing, but even worse, when we nailed it, most of the time that still meant that the customer was unhappy because they hadn't thought through what the product should be.
Yep.
And so I started wondering, how could I change the conversation from the first moment that someone says, I want a piece of software, to make them reconsider if in fact that is what they wanted or needed, or how can you de-risk before you build? That happened to coincide really nicely with design thinking starting to become really, really popular. Design sprints, it was a little before the book Sprint came out, but we started running sprints heavily as a way to help companies actually determine what they were going to build before they invested. And we wouldn't even bid anything until they'd gone through a design sprint and we had identified if the product was right, if it was going to be. And we lost a lot of business, because we were turning people away, because we would take them through a design sprint. We'd say, oh gosh, it looks like there's not actually we wouldn't even say it. They would say, oh, it looks like there's not actually a market for the thing I was going to spend $500,000. And it wasn't always very popular with the people who owned the company, honestly, because we did lose a lot of if you don't care what the outputs are, then you probably, or the outcomes for the company. Anyway, that led me, I think, into an obsession with how do you build the right thing? Yeah. And why would you ever build something that wasn't the right thing? What a stupid waste of time and money. So, yeah. And then I worked for a big consultancy that consulted with Agile consulting for very large companies. I worked with Ford, I worked with Lockheed Martin, I worked with Mary Kay, and mostly with Ford.
Did you get a pink car for that?
No, they don't give you the pink cards either. You have to pay for them.
Oh.
So the whole thing's a lie.
That's how it works.
The way it works is you have to have sacrificed 4 of your neighbors every month to the network marketing gods. And working with companies at scale, the best thing about that was understanding how large organizations see their investments and their spend on technology. Because one of the biggest barriers, I think, to innovation is it happens outside of technology. It happens in the CFO's office.
Even those words, their technology spend.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. It's not this is our investment in our company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's operating costs.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, but almost nobody treats development as an OpEx. They all treat it as CapEx.
Yeah.
And then they do funny things in the accounting office so that they can mask the fact that a lot of what they build is crap.
Right. Right. Well, really on that point, like you kind of described this process of you started by creating the wrong stuff all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Because the users, your audience often thought that they knew what they wanted. How did you get to a process where you were able to focus more on, you kind of spoke to it a little bit, but how does building the wrong thing consistently help you inform how to build the right thing?
For me, it was more seeing thought leadership coming out of specifically Google Ventures. When the early conversations around design sprints, this is about 2014, 2013, they were using them and they were pretty excited because there were a lot of the people who were involved in GV who were kind of out yelling into development communities about, oh, this really cool thing we figured out. Mm-hmm. Where, hey, what if you took your engineers and your whole team and you sat them down for a week and gosh, maybe bring the business people in. I'll bet your marketing person would love to participate. I'll bet your sales lead would love to participate. And everybody's going to spend the first 3 days in the problem space or the first 2.5 days in the problem space until we all understand it. And then we're going to converge and figure out a solution. You see those articles and you think, gosh, could I do that? And I was fortunate that I had a boss that was encouraging and was maybe crazy enough and enough hands off that he just didn't care what we did. So we started playing with it. Yeah. And it was cool to see the engineers, it change how they thought about the work they were going to do. It was cool to see sales change how they thought about the constraints that are on the technical teams. Right. And their willingness to rethink what their demands were when they could understand. It's hard to have empathy for your coworkers until you sit in a conversation really immersively and try and solve a problem together.
Right. How do you? There's this concept that I've been thinking about so much of why people are afraid of that. It's like I call it line in the water.
Okay.
There's you're going fishing. You're it takes you 30 minutes to get to wherever you're going to fish, 30 minutes to get back, and you only have 4 hours. If you spend an hour with a tangled line, then you have less line in the water.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And so I'm curious to hear how you convinced all these companies to do this, because it feels like a lot of executives are dead set on line in the water means fingers on keyboards coding for developers. If your fingers aren't, then you can't be catching fish. Your line's not in the water.
Every single, maybe not every single one, but I've done hundreds of design sprints, most of them with an executive in the room, mm-hmm. because we wouldn't even let them come unless they had a senior decider. We won't go through the effort unless the person who has to hold the decision is there to make the decision.
Yep.
It's also a really good sales tactic.
That's
really effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every single senior executive on day 2, when it's we're having hard conversations about what's going to stay and what's going to go.
Yeah.
Almost every one of them a line would come. We already know what we need to build. We just need to get moving.
Yeah.
Right?
Get your line in the water.
Right. Just physically painful for them. And I'd always be no. Not only do we not know what we need to build, but the last hour has convinced me that we were wrong about everything we already talked about.
Yeah.
I think you have to market to them the pain. We had our value proposition was most development fails. Spend a week with us. We will give you a validated idea or a validatable idea, a semi-validated idea, and a ready to develop roadmap. We also had decent amount of data and a whole lot of social proof of people saying, I accomplished more, me and my team accomplished more in 1 week than we have in the last 6 months. Because people would come out with decisions made.
Yep. Alignment
Across the team, a complete roadmap, and like we could pretty consistently take products to market after that in 3 to 4 months, which most people can't ever say that they can get a product to market in 3 to 4 months, especially when with any level of complexity.
Yeah, and zero validation behind it.
Well,
Even if you do it in 3 months and it's not validated, then
right.
Good luck.
So, but it still was a hard sell, and we lost a lot of business, especially because I wouldn't tell people what their software was going to cost them until they had gone through the process.
Did anyone ever cancel like midway through? They're like, day 2, I can't do this.
Yes, the bucked up guys.
Really?
We were, but it wasn't their bucked up product. They were going to build. They had a product that was an Instagram product, and they were going to build a LinkedIn version. And we got through day 2, and they didn't throw up their hands. They realized that we invalidated by day 2, and they were like, "Oh, there's not a product here.
Cool.
We're out of here."
Yes,
Thanks for your time.
Nice.
That's interesting because you actually took me through my first design sprints in my career. And we've a handful of them, different brands, right? Getting through it, and there's something to be said about bringing the different disciplines in. When people are trying to solve the same problem, but from different angles, you really get a lot of different things that you hadn't considered before. This was actually going to be my follow-up to you when you did your intro, is you had these multidisciplinary teams. You have this giant diversity of thought. How did that help you with your innovation process, having different ways to look at it?
Yeah, I think it comes to framing and communication for me. Whenever I have someone telling me this is the thing, I know it, I always ask how they know. And usually, if it's validated, I'm like, okay, let's go for it. But if it's not, I always try to press to get them to actually articulate it.
Yeah.
Because typically they can't really articulate. They maybe articulate what it is at a high level, sometimes at a low level, but usually they can't articulate why. And so when you bring multiple people with different backgrounds, they literally, I've been in conversations with like an electrical engineer, computer engineer, and they're talking about the product that I'm helping them build. And I don't understand like a single thing they're saying. And it's not even the technical stuff.
Right.
They just use different vocabulary. So then I think when you get all these different people, they're thinking about, they've been taught to structure and solve problems with different ways. And so then when you have all these people who have different backgrounds, right, then they're going to bring a totally different perspective. This is the value of diversity.
Right.
And one of the many values is that someone who comes from a totally different background than me is going to approach a problem and an opportunity totally different than I will. And we might land in the same place of what we're doing, but that unique perspective of an interdisciplinary team just only decreases the amount of ambiguity and uncertainty because they are approaching from a different perspective.
Do you find any challenges in finding talking with these really advanced people? Do you have any challenges with having like common language?
Oh yeah,
in the group?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think that's why if all these companies that say they're customer first, in my opinion, one of the values of that is if everyone's talking about the customer and the customer's experience in their journey, then that anchors people to the same spot.
Mm-hmm.
So you can only get so far away from the customer talking about board design,
right,
and how that affects them, then instead of if you start at board design. I think that's the value of it.
That's awesome. So those were our introductions. We actually kind of pulled up some questions, wrote some notes down, this was more of an intro, right? Yeah. So the first one is, and I challenge you to do this because we just spent 20 minutes attempting this. What is your definition of innovation in one sentence?
Connor gets to go first.
I'm typing it. Chat dot. I think innovation is a new method or a new way, let's say a unique way to accomplish the goals of some organization in a way that makes that organization, a new way to accomplish some target customer or group, accomplish their goal that also accomplishes the goals of the organization doing it. So I used to say it's a new way that makes a viable business, but I think that nonprofits can innovate, and they're not trying to make a viable business. They're trying to proliferate their message or accomplish their goals throughout the world, and they can do that with a new method, whatever. So that's where my definition is. A new, like a novel or unique way to create value for some group that accomplishes the organization's goals.
That was one sentence. He did it.
Commas.
That's fine.
Colons,
That's fine.
semicolons.
That's fine. Punctuation is allowed. Great.
I think of innovation as successfully implementing new ideas. They don't have to be business ideas. You can innovate in education and do things that could change the world that nobody, at least in the short term, profits on. Ideally, innovation is new ideas that solve problems that humans have.
Yeah.
We talk a lot here about the difference between incremental innovation and breakthrough innovation. There are a lot of examples in the world of humans doing truly astronomical breakthrough things.
Sure.
The landing of the man on the moon when in 1962 when JFK said we're going to do it. We didn't have the ability to do it, right? It wasn't that we were most of the way there and we were just going to have to pull it off. We literally didn't know how to do any of that stuff. That's pretty remarkable. But we also fixed the ozone, the hole in the ozone, and a lot of that was policy change, right? So that was not a sentence, but
no, that's actually interesting to me because a lot of times when people are talking about innovation, the people listening hear some new protocol for sending some game changer, but really you can do it in increments. You can actually make big changes in little bits, and that's a little more difficult to define, I think. But I think it's a lot more easy to accomplish.
When you look at how we use cell phones today, cell phones are a perfect example of an incremental innovation. The first couple of cell phones were wildly breakthrough innovation, right? The brick cell phones that they had in 1981 when I was a kid, that was breakthrough innovation. It was a phone you could take with you.
Based on the moon landing tech, actually.
Based on moon landing tech that they were able to utilize. Every innovation there, including our current cell phones, was just an increment off of that first cell phone.
It's funny, my aunt has this bright, purple Corvette from the 80s with a phone in it.
Oh, that's cool.
I remember in the early 90s riding with her in it, and I would always say, "Oh, can I call my mom?"
Because it was still so cool, right?
It was still so cool, and she goes, "Oh, that thing sucks." She didn't have a cell phone.
She just hated that phone.
She just thought it was crap.
Well, I'm sure it was.
I'm sure it was. She never let me use it. And that's the beauty of innovation. Is the house phone at that time was still so much better.
Well, even now, house phones are remarkable. You don't need electricity for them.
Yeah.
It's kind of when the apocalypse comes and we wish we still had hard lines into all of our houses because we can't communicate anymore without cells. Yeah, regular phones were really good. The tech was great. It had withstood 100 years of, and had been virtually unchanged, actually. Not a lot of incremental innovation on phones, although,
Yeah, the rotary.
Yeah, the rotary.
Form fab, industrial design innovation.
Thank heavens.
All right, so here's an interesting one. I would love to hear, and we've kind of touched on some of this, different forms of innovation processes that you've seen work, and ones that you've seen absolutely not work. I'd love to start with the ones that don't.
Honestly, we've talked so much about this in the past month. We listened to this podcast from Lenny and John Cutler went around recently, where John Cutler basically says, and he was kind of the product expert at Amplitude, which is very aligned with their business model, right? Selling product analytics. He was the talking head for that. He said that in his mind, most things can work if you're committed to it and that you're aligned on it. So Lenny in the podcast is like grilling him, trying to get him to say that feature factories don't work for like 10 minutes. And he's basically like, look, if you have a dictatorial CEO and all the employees love that, they'll probably be successful because at least they're aligned, moving in the same direction.
Right.
I don't know if I believe that all the way.
Well, I think China would love to tell you that they can say that that's true.
Yeah.
They have a very prescriptive managerial approach. I guarantee you they don't have a bunch of empowered teams.
Yep.
And they build really breakthrough innovation all the time. They really do.
Yeah.
A lot of, they certainly copy a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
They do.
But they have technologies that we have here that they've proliferated, and we can't figure out how to get the user experience right.
They do.
Like QR codes. Like, I can't believe that. I went to Slab Pizza the other day and I couldn't pay with my phone. I had to run to my car, which is a massive inconvenience.
Why couldn't you pay? You mean they?
I just didn't have my cards with me. I just bring my phone.
Well, I know, but why couldn't they take your phone?
They didn't have the Apple Pay.
That's shocking.
I know. Like, I bought berries from a 90-year-old woman in China with my phone. Like, she couldn't take a card. I didn't have I didn't have any cash.
Yeah.
Like, she literally pulled up her phone and I scanned it and paid her for a berry she picked in her field. That's incredible. So that's a fair point. That's a fair point. So I think it's all about alignment of what does the employee expect, how to work. What do the teams say they're going to do, and then what do they actually do? And if those things are all aligned, I think you can be pretty wildly successful at almost anything. I play this game called Teamfight Tactics. It's like an auto chess game based on League of Legends, and it's all randomized. So like there's tons of luck involved, but there's also like 3 key strategies that if you follow, almost always you're more likely to get to win. So there's 8 people playing, and it's considered a win if you get a top 4. You get plus ELO points if you're top 4, minus ELO points if you're bottom 4. So it's like it's this idea of min-maxing against luck. Like, can you minimize the risk of loss and maximize the possibility of winning? And so I hope the things we believe about innovation processes are the min-max version.
Okay, I can see that.
Because maybe a feature factory can work, but are there things, this is my question, do you think there are things that fundamentally, if you do them, will make you more likely to innovate?
I think it,
on average,
in spite of whatever China has going on, and I haven't gone and watched, how they're building software in China. I definitely think the way you structure your teams, the way how you ask people to work is the leading indicator of whether or not you'll be able to be successful and build innovation. Somebody has to want to come up with how to solve the problem. And care enough about the problem and feel like they have enough ownership for the problem to be able to solve it, and unless somebody has an idea that can solve a problem, you can't innovate because innovation is building something that solves a problem, right? So, yeah, I think the way you structure a team matters, and I think it's hard to find a whole bunch of people who want to be told what to do, right? Because that's Lenny's precursor. You would need an entire society that was okay with being told what to do, which is what the Chinese have.
Yes.
We don't have that in America.
Yeah.
We have a lot of individualism. I would even say in Europe, where they're not as individualistic, they still kind of believe that they've got ideas that they can, unique ideas. So empowerment for individuals, I think, is a huge part. You have to believe that you get to be the one that figures out how to solve the problem.
Have you heard this story kicking around about Steve Jobs and the first iPhone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
About how he hated it?
He hated it.
I read his biography, and they talk about the reality distortion field.
Mm-hmm.
This is the moon landing. He said, we're going to do it. Someone had some outrageous goal. And then the thing that people say about Steve Jobs is that he could tell you that you're going to do something impossible and then convince you it was possible.
Interesting.
His reality distortion field, right? And so that's really interesting to think about. How do you, what is the role of the executive in that empowerment? Because if he didn't have that, we can do the impossible.
Mm-hmm.
I question if his people would have stood up to him and said, "No, you're wrong about this phone. This phone is the right thing." If he hadn't have already empowered them for years.
No, you are totally right, because Apple's an engineering-driven organization and always has been.
Yeah.
Because he knew that every minute of his success was because he had an engineer on his side.
Yeah.
Right?
From the beginning.
From the beginning. He's a marketing guy at heart who realized that if he could let engineers solve the problems, it's why his famous quote of we don't hire smart people and tell them what to do.
Yeah.
He was talking about his engineers because he had empowered them for years. Now, that being said, I have my own argument about the iPhone. I don't think it was that innovative. And I don't think that it's actually the iPhone itself that was the major innovation.
I agree.
I had a Palm Pre before the iPhone came out that had a full touchscreen that was easier for engineers to develop against because it was a PHP-based language, and they had functionality that even when the iPhone came out, the iPhone didn't have the ability to move between tiles or separate screens. The iPhone didn't have that. What Apple had that nobody else had was the iTunes, the ability, because they had iTunes for so long, they had a distribution model that was a repeatable distribution model. So it's actually the App Store that's the innovation, not the phone. Yeah. Because the thing that Palm Pre couldn't figure out was how to get people to build on the platform, and then how to get people to come, you got to have a killer app. And Apple nailed the killer app because they have the App Store.
Right. There's an app for that.
I truly believe that's the actual innovation, not the cell phone itself.
Interesting.
I agree. I think they had two big ones. Mm-hmm. First was that they knew how to leverage digital music in a way that hadn't been before. Mm-hmm. The second was the entire ecosystem. Yeah. I really enjoy that product line now because of the way that it interacts with everyone else in that ecosystem, right? That I think was fairly innovative at the time. I think it's almost expected these days, but that's kind of what happens with innovation, is we all kind of adopt it.
Yeah.
So one of our favorite quotes that we hear from, this isn't a Steve Jobs, this is more of a Zuckerberg, the move fast and break stuff.
Oh, yes.
So my final question here is, does move fast and break stuff actually lead to innovation?
I think it is a really dumb way of saying something that's absolutely critical. Absolutely move fast. Speed will always be a superpower. A bias for action should be woven through everything that you do. So yeah, move fast. But you don't actually have to break stuff, because if you choose to validate ideas before you build them, that's not the same as breaking. And I think that they're saying, fail fast is about the same thing, but I think the break things is don't hold too tight to an idea of what you want to build. Don't fall in love with almost anything. Because if you're moving fast and you're validating ideas, you're probably throwing away about 70% of what you might have wanted to build, maybe 80.
Move fast and break stuff. Yeah, I like you said, I think it's more like you should learn as fast as possible. I think it's more about decreasing uncertainty as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Like, and that's going to require, like, there's whole. I'm a video game nerd, as you guys are finding out. But like the idea of fog of war, like you can't. There's only so much you can do to decrease the fog of war in some product place before you put something real in front of someone. Like, and so that requires you to build things and actually build them, whether that's no code, low code, or an actual product. And you may have all the signals, and you may have decreased loads of uncertainty. And as soon as you like put an actual product in front of someone, you're going to learn so much more than what they say, because they're going to actually interact with it. You're going to ask them to maybe pay you, all the things that tell you whether you can actually, it's actually innovation, right? Like if it's not solving the business's goals, or then you haven't really validated it all the way. But what is interesting is at Facebook, they have too many users for surveys to really be that effective. Like
Interesting. Too much noise.
If you have 3 billion, what is it, like 3 billion daily active users or something?
Yeah.
How can a survey of 100 people ever be
Very
useful?
Yeah.
So for them, they ship stuff. You know, you could ship stuff to 2 million people, and that's like a fraction of your.
Yeah, that's
your
a
user
wild
base.
A/B
Like it could be
test.
horrible.
Yeah.
And it's not really gonna. It's a blip. For
Yeah.
them. So like they for them, I think moving fast and breaking stuff probably makes more sense than because of their scale.
Because of the scale.
Like, yeah, you got to ship something there to see if it actually works, because how does interviewing 50 people out of.
Here's what else I think they're saying though, and I haven't worked at Facebook, this is just my theory. For most large-scale organizations or organizations of almost any size, a thing that happens politically is to move to this place where people are worried about safety, and decisions become harder to make because people want to make sure that the decisions are approved. And I think part of what Facebook did, especially early on, is like they wanted people to get stuff done.
Yeah.
And so rather than worry that you were going to be making, like, most decisions can be undone. Most things, even if you break them, can be fixed. So prioritize speed over caution.
Yeah.
Which, especially if you're a young company, it is freaking fantastic advice, because bureaucracy slows organizations down.
Everyone's afraid to lose their job.
Everyone's afraid to lose their job because there's no safety, and if you make mistakes, we're just going to fire you, right? But if the company culture is it's okay to break stuff, then you're encouraging people to take chances because they know it's okay to break stuff, right? If it's part of your company's mantra, it's actually pretty. I mean, I don't know if that was their intent, but if it was, it's a pretty savvy way to let people know it's okay to screw up in the interest of speed. Because there's, a lot of non-innovative organizations, they are the opposite. They would rather have the security of not making mistakes rather than innovation. It's what they've chosen to prioritize. They want decisions triple checked. You can't have a typo in something, right? That would be unforgivable, because their culture is around perfection, not innovation. Innovation works better in a place where people aren't afraid of making mistakes.
I agree. I actually, in my experience, those tend to be the feature factories.
Yeah,
because it's prescriptive. We know what we're building. Everyone's afraid of their job, or keeping their job, right? And so here's what we're building, and here's the order that is being built in, and crank it out.
Right, and don't rock the boat. Don't question the priorities. Just go and make stuff, because this is what we want. Not we don't know what we want. We think you as educated professionals can help us figure it out if you're allowed to make mistakes.
Yeah. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. I'm looking forward to doing more of these. Even this has caused me to think about some of the next episodes we're going to be doing on these topics. Especially, since this is about innovation and we're trying to get this information out to as many people as we can, I'm looking forward to getting feedback from viewers and hearing the kinds of questions they have. I did have one more thought before we wrap up. You were talking about the size of Facebook and the scale just causing problems. With surveys, with user groups, with interviews, for somebody who's beginning in the innovation space, what size of groups should a new company, a fresh company, start trying to target and ask questions to? How small is too small and how big is too big if we're a brand new startup and we're looking to actually validate some of our ideas?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I've been involved in a lot of incubators, so I've heard this one so many times. I'll try not to be like a robot in my response, but there's basically two things to consider. One is the industry, which basically is just an indication of the size of the market you're going after. The second thing is the strength of the signal you're receiving. So if you're in B2B SaaS and you talk to 20 SaaS companies about this problem you think you're trying to solve, and 18 of them say, absolutely, we feel that problem and build on it, you probably may not need to go much deeper. You could. There's all kinds of statistics behind this. But if you talk to 20 people and 7 or 8 or 10 or 11 say, yeah, we have that, right? So I think it's the intensity of the response the responses you're receiving and the quantity of that level of intense. And the way you hear a lot of people say this is you should go after shark bite pains. That's because it's easier to validate shark bite pains. If you're getting a mosquito bite, then everyone gets mosquito bites. So people can solve that tons of ways, but there's pretty prescribed ways to help someone who's been bitten by a shark.
Right.
Yeah. And so if you're a new startup, you should be talking to as many people as you need to get a gauge on the intensity of the problem you're solving and how many people feel it that intensely.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I came into this, from the data and analyst space, right? And so much of our analysis has been built on solid data, repeatable behaviors, that kind of stuff. And it's been such an interesting mindset shift to go, oh, actually the emotional response is the signal.
Yep.
That's the part that we want to pay attention to. And I think that as far as innovation goes, those are really where you find the problem spaces that we're going to try to solve, right?
Absolutely.
Which is why our next episode is likely going to be about living in those problem spaces and talking about what that signal looks like. So yeah, I think we kind of, we're right at an hour, or at least according to me. I don't know what the rest of. Awesome. So I just want to thank you guys for having this conversation. This has been fun. I'm looking forward to doing this again. For those of you watching, thank you so much for watching. This is an innovative community podcast. Please join the community. There's going to be links to the Discord. Our shows are on YouTube, and we're going to be posting content to Twitter. Again, on YouTube, it is called Nerd Community. Twitter is @NerdUnited1. Go give those a follow and start innovating, guys. We look forward to it.
And we'll try to get this stuff up on Spotify, Apple Music, that kind of thing.
Spotify, Apple Music, all the good
More
places.
platforms, the better.
Yeah, exactly.
Podcasts.
People here are asking where they can watch it, so it's time to put that list together.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.